which he always assumed when disposed to be ugly-tempered, he said he had done the best he could. But as I had seen the solemn pace at which he rode, I felt dubious about his best endeavours, and of course there was a little scene; but the young European Mtongi of an East African expedition must needs sup with the fellows he has chosen. We arrived at Madete at 4 p.m., minus 2 donkeys, which had stretched their weary limbs in death. We had crossed the Mukondokwa about 3 p.m., and after taking its bearings and course, I made sure that its rise took place near a group of mountains about 40 miles north by west of Guru Peak. Our road led west north west, and at this place finally diverged from the river. On the 14th, after a march of 7 miles over hills whose sandstone and granite formation cropped visibly here and there above the surface, whose stony and dry aspect seemed reflected in every bush and plant, and having gained an altitude of about 800 feet above the flow of the Mukondokwa, we sighted the lake of Ugombo, a grey sheet of water lying directly at the foot of the hill, from whose summit we gazed at the scene. The view was neither beautiful nor pretty, but what I should call refreshing. It afforded a pleasant relief to the eyes fatigued from dwelling on the bleak country around. Besides, the immediate neighbourhood of the lake was too tame to call forth any enthusiasm. There were no grandly swelling mountains, no smiling landscapes, nothing but a dun brown peak, about 1000 feet high above the surface of the lake at its western extremity, from which the lake derived its name, Ugombo; nothing but a low dun brown irregular range, running parallel with its northern shore at the distance of a mile; nothing but a low plain stretching from its western shore far away towards the Mpwapwa Mountains and Marenga Mkali, then apparent to us from our coign of vantage, from which extensive scene of dun brownness we were glad to rest our eyes on the quiet grey water beneath. Descending from the summit of the range, which bounded the lake east for about 400 feet, we travelled along the northern shore. The time occupied in the journey from the eastern to the western extremity was exactly 1 hour and 30 minutes. As this side represents its greatest length, I conclude that the mile is 3 miles long by 2 miles greatest breadth. The immediate shores of the lake, on all sides, for at least 50 feet from the water's edge, is one impassable morass nourishing rank reeds and rushes, where the hippopotamus' ponderous form has crushed into watery trails the soft composition of the morass as he passes from the lake on his nocturnal excursions. The lesser animals, such as the mbogo, buffalo, the pundatera, zebra, the twiga, giraffe, the boar, the kudu, the hyrax, or coney, and the antelope, come here also to quench their thirst by night. The surface of the lake swarms with an astonishing variety of waterfowl, such as black swan, duck, ibis sacra cranes, pelicans, and soaring above on the lookout for their prey are fish eagles and hawks, while the neighbourhood is resonant with the loud chirps of the guinea fowls calling for their young, with the harsh cry of the toucan, the cooing of the pigeon, and the tweet tu of the owl. From the long grass in its vicinity also issue the grating and loud cry of the florican, woodcock, and grouse. Being obliged to halt here 2 days, owing to the desertion of the Hindi cooper Jako with one of my best carbines, I improved the opportunity of exploring the northern and southern shores of the lake. At the rocky foot of a low, humpy hill on the northern side, about 15 feet above the present surface of the water, I detected in most distinct and definite lines the agency of waves. From its base could be traced clear to the edge of the dank morass tiny lines of the comminuted shell, as plainly marked as the small particles which lie in rows on a beach after a receding tide. There is no doubt that the wave marks on the sandstone might have been traced much higher by one skilled in geology. It was only its elementary character that was visible to me. Nor do I entertain the least doubt, after a 2 days' exploration of the neighbourhood, especially of the low plain at the western end, that this lake of Ugombo is but the tail of what was once a large body of water, equal in extent to the Tanganika; and, after ascending half way up Ugombo Peak, this opinion was confirmed when I saw the long depressed line of plain at its base stretching towards the Mpwapwa Mountains 30 miles off, and thence round to Marenga Mkali, and covering all that extensive surface of 40 miles in breadth and at unknown length. A depth of 12 feet more, I thought, as I gazed upon it, would give the lake a length of 30 miles, and a breadth of 10. A depth of 30 feet would increase its length over 100 miles and give it a breadth of 50, for such was the level nature of the plain that stretched west of Ugombo and north of Marenga Mkali. Besides, the water of the lake partook slightly of the bitter nature of the Matamombo Creek, distant 15 miles, and in a still lesser degree of that of Marenga Mkali, 40 miles off. Towards the end of the first day of our hold, the Hindi cooper Jako arrived in camp, alleging as an excuse that feeling fatigued he had fallen asleep in some bushes a few feet from the roadside. Having been the cause of our detention in the hungry wilderness of Ugombo, I was not in a frame of mind to forgive him, so, to prevent any future truant tricks on his part, I was under the necessity of including him with the chain gangs of runaways. 2 more of our donkeys died, and to prevent any of the valuable baggage being left behind, I was obliged to send Farquhar off on my own riding ass to the village of Mpwapwa, 30 miles off, under the charge of Mabruki Burton. To save the expedition from ruin, I was reluctantly compelled to come to the conclusion that it were better for me, for him and concerned, that he be left with some kind of chief of a village, with a 6 months' supply of cloth and beads, until he got well, than that he make his own recovery impossible. The 16th of May saw us journeying over the plain which lies between Ugombo and Mpwapwa, skirting close, at intervals, a low range of trap rock, out of which had become displaced by some violent agency several immense boulders. On its slopes grew the kolquall to a size which I had not seen in Abyssinia. In the plain grew baobab, an immense tamarind, and a variety of thorn. Within 5 hours from Ugombo the mountain range deflected towards the north east, while we continued on a northwesterly course, heading for the lofty mountain line of the Mpwapwa. To our left towered to the blue clouds the gigantic Rubeho. The adoption of this new road to Unyanyembe, by which we were travelling, was now explained. We were enabled to avoid the passes and stiff steeps of Rubeho, and had nothing worse to encounter than a broad smooth plain which sloped gently to Ugogo. After a march of 15 miles we camped at a dry mtoni called Matamombo, celebrated for its pools of bitter water of the colour of ochre. Monkeys and rhinoceroses, besides kudus, steinboks, and antelopes, were numerous in the vicinity. At this camp my little dog Omar died of inflammation of the bowels, almost on the threshold of the country, Ugogo, where his faithful watchfulness would have been invaluable to me. The next day's march was also 15 miles in length, through one interminable jungle of thorn bushes. Within 2 miles of the camp the road led up a small river bed, broad as an avenue, clear to the Kambi of Mpwapwa, which was situated close to a number of streams of the purest water. The following morning found us much fatigued after the long marches from Ugombo, and generally disposed to take advantage of the precious luxuries Mpwapwa offered to caravans fresh from the fly-plagued lands of the Wasagua and Wado. Sheikh Thani, clever but innocently speaking old Arab, was encamped under the grateful umbrage of a huge mtamba sycamore, and had been regaling himself with fresh milk, luscious mutton, and rich bullock humps, ever since his arrival here 2 days before; and, as he informed me, it did not suit his views to quit such a happy abundance so soon for the saline nitrous water of Marenga Mkali, with its several terekezas and manifold disagreeables. "No," he said to me, emphatically, "better stop here 2 or 3 days, give your tired animals some rest, collect all the pagazis you can, fill your inside with fresh milk, sweet potatoes, beef, mutton, ghee, honey, beans, matama, maweri, and nuts. Then, Inshallah, we shall go together through Ugogo without stopping anywhere." As the advice tallied accurately with my own desired and keen appetite for the good things he named, he had not long to wait for my assent to his counsel. "Ugogo," continued he, "is rich with milk and honey, rich in flour, beans, and almost every eatable thing, and, Inshallah, before another week is gone we shall be in Ugogo." I had heard from passing caravans so many extremely favourable reports respecting Ugogo and its productions that it appeared to me a very land of promise, and I was most anxious to refresh my jaded stomach with some of the precious esculents raised in Ugogo. But when I heard that Mpwapwa also furnished some of those delicate eatables and good things, most of the morning hours were spent in inducing the slow-witted people to part with them, and when, finally, eggs, milk,